Hello, everyone. Happy Thursday and welcome to Something to Talk About Live. My name is Jamie Hinkle. My pronouns are she and her, and I'm the Learning and Inclusion Manager at PFLAG National. And just like always, I am going to introduce Jean Marie Nevada to host today's conversation.
Hey, Jamie, how's it going?
It's going good. It's going good. I'm a little sunburned still. I did the Pacific Northwest Greatest Hits over the weekend, and I got a little bit of sun.
Proving to everybody who doesn't believe it that there is, in fact, sunshine in the Pacific Northwest.
There is. It's been very blue skied lately.
It has been. I was up there this weekend. It was beautiful. It was really nice. Well, we will see you in a little while, and you'll be talking to people on the chat. Bye, Jamie. Hey, everybody. My name is Jean Marie Nevada. My pronouns are she and her, or ella, if you speak Spanish. And I am the Director of Learning and Inclusion at PFLAG National. And every single Thursday afternoon, we get together to have a conversation with you. We pick an article, we write some questions, and then we invite friends to talk about it. And this week, we have a really interesting article. And I'll tell you, Jamie picked this one for us. And as soon as she picked it, it led to a lot of conversation. So I am super excited about the discussion. So we are going to be using an article from Allure that was written by Aamina Khan that was called How I Found a Queer Haircut That Finally Felt Like Home, which has led to lots of conversations about identities, particularly queer identities, and hair. And to do this conversation, I am super lucky to have two of my colleagues with me this week. So I'd like to bring in McKenzie Hart, our Learning and Inclusion Coordinator. Hey, McKenzie.
Hey, and Marie, how are you?
Sanchez, our Director of Advocacy, Policy, and Partnerships. Hello, McKenzie and Diego.
Hello, Jean Marie. I'm McKenzie.
I am so happy to have you both here because I think that you bring really fascinating perspectives on this article. So, as I started reading this article, I started in my head listing lesbian hairstyles. And I'm like, there's the DA and the buzz cut and the pixie cuts. And I realized how powerful hair is in terms of identity and even my own. And we'll talk about that a little bit. But I would actually love to hear from both of you to talk about how your hair and your identity are sort of part of your coming out journey. And Diego, I'm wondering if we can start with you.
Thank you so much. Well, as I age, hair is a serious topic in a different way, but I actually don't mind if it all goes away. I have to say that hair is something that is such a core part. I mean, the article that we read, I related so closely to the person with yellow hair. About the whole thing of it being about control, and then also with someone else who talked about it being part of culture. And so those two things for me, I mean, I grew up with very, very curly hair, and I still have it. It's bedded down right now, but as soon as the curl shows, I want to buzz it out. But my first hair story that was really important was that when I was in the 6th grade, I was a straight A, perfect attendance type, and I cut off a little of my hair because I really wanted it short, and it was, Latina long, let's just say that, curly, blonde from Panama, then got a little darker when we moved to the States, but long. And I cut a little of it off, and my father got furious. He's like, we support you here, but you can't be doing that. Mm-hmm. And what he did is he sat me in a chair and chopped it off. My mother was a professional cosmetologist among many professions. And she was like, let me do it. And he was like, no. And out of anger. So I went to school the next day with this hair that was just mortifying. And so that was, it was an acting out in a way that wouldn't go away the next day, in a way that a lot of people consider their hair acting in order to express out so that they can show up every day in a way that they prefer. So that was one. And then the other is like, here we are in the time of pandemic. And the one thing I told, I can't remember who I told it to, but what I know that I said in a meeting, I think it was probably with our staff, is while everybody else is going to worry about their color and their cut, every trans guy has got a pair of clippers and we know how to use them, because it wasn't safe for years to go to anybody for being misgendered or beaten up. So, hair has been quite an expressive part of many people's lives, but I loved that I could relate to these two very young people in a genuine way relative to culture and curls and texture, and then also just about everything in your life is controlled, and this is the one piece you try to touch. And the one time I tried to touch mine, I got severely punished, but never for being who I was, but for expressing it outwardly in that way that I tried.
I think that's so interesting how we learn lessons about the world around us because of how we are treated because of our hair. And that's very much what the lesson was for you. And I think a lot of us have that sort of unfortunate rite of passage in a negative way in many respects. And it definitely colors the way we see ourselves and others. So, McKenzie, different generation, different experiences. Tell me about your hair and your identity.
Absolutely. I was thankfully blessed with, controllable hair for my entire life. The only time it wasn't super controllable was in 8th grade when I wanted to grow it out, and instead it just grew up. And I don't really know why that happened. And then once again, a few years after college, when I let it get long, probably longer than your hair, Jean Marie, and then it just would uncontrollably tangle all the time. And so those are two of the instances where my hair didn't treat me well. But hair has always been a pretty major part of my identity, at least since high school. I remember that at a young age, I really wanted long hair, and it just wasn't happening. And like I mentioned, it would grow up, get too curly, and just not work out that way. But I also wanted jet black hair from, I think, 4th grade on. I just wanted to dye my hair jet black, and it was just something that didn't go away for quite a while. And then eventually I did in freshman year of high school, and I really loved it. And then that actually kind of started a hair color journey where then throughout high school, I had blue hair, red hair, purple hair, different colors, sometimes letting it actually be natural, redying it jet black if I didn't love the color I chose after a while, etc. So, but for me, hair was also kind of a point of rebellion. That I was in some programs in high school that were, not great. They were not great cultures in the program. It was adults that didn't treat us well. And so I would often dye my hair and then be told you have to dye it back, or you have to change the hair color before you can go on stage for this theater art show. And so it was my little way of kind of, rebelling. And it wasn't necessarily to do with my queerness, but just a way to stand up to it. And then halfway through college, I decided, you know what, no, I'm actually going to commit to growing out my hair because I've wanted to for as long as I can remember. And I remember when my hair was finally long enough to put into a really sad, painful ponytail. But once I was able to do that, I remember thinking, I can definitely pull this off. And then so I let it grow out for several years, actually. And then, like I mentioned before, it got too long, couldn't control it. But I loved having really long hair. And then where it kind of got tied into my identity as a bi person is I saw a post going around, I think on Tumblr, that talked about the quote unquote bi bob. And I remember characters were on it like Cora from The Legend of Korra, Marceline the Vampire Queen from Adventure Time, Charlize Theron, and I forget which movie, but people kept sharing it. And I remember thinking, oh, that's really funny. And then when my hair was just so long and I wanted to cut it, I said, I don't want to go short again. I don't want to have it the way I had it for most of my life. I want to still have some length to it. So I remember going and getting a bob cut. And that was really, really so fun for me because it was so much more controllable, but still got to be long. And I felt like I got to express my bisexuality. And also as a politics nerd, I felt like I had the same haircut that senators like Kirsten Gillibrand had in Congress. So I felt like I was connecting to different parts of myself. And I've kind of stuck with that haircut since for the last couple of years because I've just really loved it. It's a little long now, but I'm getting it cut in a few weeks, and I'm probably just going to go with that bob once again, the bi bob. So that's kind of my history with it. And it's not just relating to my queerness; it's different parts of my identity that my hair has been so important to me, but it's a lot of overlap that I think is really interesting.
So, it's interesting as you both speak, your hair has been this way to define yourself, to set yourself apart. And I think about my own hair, coming out in the 90s and the early 2000s, there sort of were the acceptable hairstyles for lesbians. And long hair like this, very femme appearance, was not one of those things. And I distinctly remember actually feeling pressure to cut my hair, to have my hair look a certain way, and not being able to do it because it would feel like it was wearing a costume. And I realized that my femme existence and my appearance as a high femme in this community actually became my act of rebellion. And interestingly enough, my rebellion was inside of queer spaces and not outside of them, where in many cases, this actually rendered me invisible until I was standing with somebody who did not make me invisible any longer. And it's a really fascinating thing to understand. So much of how I was judged as a valid or invalid queer person had to do with the way I looked. And a huge piece of that was my hair. And I never quite understood it as deeply until I was going through it. So, you know, one of the things that this article really talks about is that hair is often seen as a very gendered aspect to our appearances. And Diego, you as a trans man, McKenzie, you as a person who identifies as non-binary, how has that been true for you? Is it a very gendered thing? Is it this very communicative thing? And is that what makes sometimes changing your hair a difficult thing? And Diego, maybe we can start with you.
Sure, thank you. Yeah, the short answer, yes. Yes, it is very much gendered. And for me, I had hair dysphoria growing up. I never realized what I could call it, but I had hair dysphoria. And it went along with my body dysphoria. And one of the more powerful, horrible memories that I have, and it's just, I still feel it, is high school graduation photograph. Because, you know, every girl gets her hair done. And I had normally very kinky hair, but it was now very curly and just, I had lipstick. It's just everything that could go wrong was happening on me. But the hair was really tough because it was long, and I usually pulled it back into a ponytail so I could pretend it wasn't there. But what the other part that really stuck out was I don't know what you call them, but you know how the drape thing that hangs off your shoulder, like it showed shoulders. And it's like, I am, you know me very well, Jean Marie, for decades, even though you're only 21.
And that's why I love you so much.
And I am a person who, I like my buttons done. I wear sleeves. I button the sleeves. I don't roll them up. And I wear a tie whenever I can, because I have decades to make up for when I couldn't wear a tie and wanted to. But I'm very sealed off in that way. Where hair comes in is, you know, I mentioned this earlier to you, but I just feel like when people talk about performing their gender, today performance is power. And for me, it's also privilege. When we were young as queer people, I mean, being part of the Butch Femme community, we traveled in tribes. And you had the team of butches walking wherever they were going. And then when you're lucky, you get the team of femmes going with you. And it was our presentation to, yes, we're here and leave us alone. And the women, the femmes made us safer, and we made you more dangerous. You know, we made it more dangerous for you and you made it safer for us. And so there's this dichotomy. And I look at this article with people presenting as individuals, thinking about their statement as one, which we didn't really do that much back then. I mean, most of the guys were always having either buzz cuts or something short as they could get it. And the women's hair was just always beautiful. It was long and beautiful, just like the women were long and beautiful. But it's a really a big part of gender, because it's that momentary expression of someone says you are or you're not. And so with are or not comes affirmation or denial. And so when you're refused out of identity that you feel, it is as hard as if it came off their lips. We learn as queer people, I think many of us who had to navigate unsafe turf and territory, we learn to read eyes, we read body language. We can read a zone for safety and acceptance or rejection a lot quicker than people who don't grow up having to pay attention to their environment. So the gendered part of it always, it was safe for as long as I could get it to be, and it has stayed that way. And the truth is, for guys who do hormones, perhaps, who do testosterone, the joke that I've raised, as you might imagine, I've raised lots of generations of trans guys. And so the one thing that they all share as I watch them all grow up is they're counting facial hairs for how many do I have, and they're counting head hairs for how many did I lose. And it is the funniest thing because it's just generation to generation. It's a thing in common. And I try to explain to them that the loss of your head hair is actually part of the masculinity process. If you learn to embrace it, that would be better. And so one of the things I did is I did a real tight crop buzz cut all the way around. Now, not a quick cut, but a real buzz cut. And I told all the guys around me, now I know that I have a head that when I go bald, it's going to be okay. I have a good shaped head. So I'm not ever going to worry about losing hair. But it was part of the gender part of me that expressed itself in different ways.
Thank you. Thank you. It's amazing. As you're talking, I'm thinking we started a conversation about haircuts, and look at how far this one piece of our identity can take us. McKenzie, can you speak about that a little bit? It's sort of the gendered concept of hair.
Absolutely. I think that one of the reasons that it is so gendered is because it's one of the things that can't be hidden. It's in our culture, at least. In other cultures, hats and headdresses and other clothing is more common, but it's way harder in the United States to hide your hair. So whatever your hair looks like is going to be one of the most immediate things that people perceive about you. And so I think that's why it does take on such a gendered approach, because people will be able to see it immediately and be able to say, oh, this person has this haircut, and immediately start making some assumptions. I will say for me personally, where it really affected me most was when I would go to get haircuts, that no matter in my hometown, which was a smallish hometown, no matter where in town I went, no matter what haircut I asked for, it would always end up being the same as pretty much every other boy in town, because that was the standard. The girls would have different haircuts, not radically different, but you would see different hair textures, you would see different hair lengths, hairstyles, and everything. But for the boys, it was always very similar buzz cuts on certain areas, longer hair in certain areas, no matter what I was really seeking out or what I was looking for. And so I got so used to that just being the standard that I didn't express myself with my hair the way that I would have for quite a while. And I think for me, that was something that I realized, not in a gender specific way or in a queer specific way, but that's why I think I turned to hair color first. Because while I knew I was going to be getting the same haircuts, just because that seemed to just be the standard of what was happening in my area, doing my own hair color meant that I could kind of do whatever I wanted. And so while I wasn't thinking of that as a specifically queer thing, I think that little bit of rebellion, little bit of wanting to identify in a specific way, really shone through. And again, it was the first thing people could see about me, that they would see me walking, they would see my bright red hair walking into a room, or bright blue or dark black. Like, that's what they would see first. So it was a way for me to distinguish myself from everyone else, and not in a way that I was judging everyone else in any way, shape, or form, but in a way that I knew I wasn't, I knew that I didn't fit in with that. And I knew that wasn't what I wanted for myself personally. And so my way of going around that and seeing things as they were, maybe not consciously at the time, was to then be able to do that. And then once I got to college, I went to college in New York, and that was no longer an issue, especially once I started growing my hair out, that once it got to a certain length, I could have probably done anything I wanted with it. And that's something that is still really cool. And it's really, I hope other people in my scenario who share my identities do get to experience being able to do what they want, especially because there are so many repercussions, or so many limited options in some cases.
I think it's fascinating. There are generations between you two, and yet listen to that experience. I mean, here you are, all these generations later, still walking in to get your hair cut, and still having people doing hair, assuming that more or less there's one way the boys are going to be able to look, or, there's the boy haircut and then there's everything else. And that really very little has changed in some respects. So I want to start talking, we are PFLAG. So we are always talking to help give people ways to help their process of coming out of identity, of being seen. So I want to talk first about advice for young people. And then I want to talk about talking to parents, because I think this is something, in my experience, I've heard a lot of parents struggle with. So first, and Diego, we can start with you on this one. What would you say to a young person who is thinking about changing their hair specifically as a way to communicate and maybe even celebrate their queerness. Do it with an asterisk, and you've got some advice on that. What's the word?
Thank you so much. Yeah, because I'm the old guy, my first point is always safety first. Make sure that wherever you are, be safe. And if you have to do it through wigs for a period of time to feel expressive, don't feel that there's shame in that, but find something that makes you feel comfortable in expressing. I mean, the work that my generation has done for decades, for 50 years, is because we wanted to create a world where people who were younger could be free to be who they are. And that's exactly what's out there for kids. So I think that kids today can always go to their parents and grandparents and say, you know what? I remember from my history books and looking at old videos that when you were young, men had long hair. And that made them cool. They were cool. They were musicians, or they were hippies, or they were something that was beyond and explosive and expressive, beyond the expectation. And everybody turned out okay. So in a world where you can control when I go to bed, when I brush my teeth, what I eat, what I wear, please let me have this one thing as a way of expressing myself. Because if I'm not growing up to be creative when I'm young, it stifles me for the rest of my life, and that shouldn't be on your shoulders, mom, dad, whoever.
Agreed.
Mom, dad.
All parents, all caregivers. McKenzie, what would you say to young people who are exploring hair as a way of expression?
I would start saying with exactly the same thing that Diego just said, that safety is the most important thing, and that if you're not 100% sure that you're safe, that doesn't mean that what you want to do is less valid or that your identity is less valid. And you have a whole life ahead of you that you will be able to explore if you can't right now. And so what I would say next is kind of pulling from my experience. If you want to do different things with your hair, change your hair, but you're going to hit some limitations, find the things that you can do. So, for example, for me, I was able to do hair colors. If you want to cut your hair very short, but you're not able to do that, there are different updos that you can definitely do with your hair to be able to get at least somewhat of the experience. As Diego mentioned, wigs, if those are possible, and then you get to still determine where you are, even if it's not necessarily safe, or if you don't necessarily have the access to what you need to in order to change your appearance. What I would say to any parents or guardians who are worried is that, once again, I had every color under the sun of hair in high school. I had long hair in college. I have longer hair now. I am perceived in many different ways that are not considered the quote unquote norm. I had parents that completely supported that. My mom, other than the first 2 times I dyed my hair, colored my hair every single time until I started being able to and live away from home. My dad colored my hair a few times. Sometimes my parents would help cut my hair. So having that support and having that there was incredibly just incredibly nice and made me feel so comfortable. And now I feel very, very comfortable with my hair, and I really, really like my hair. What I'd also say, if you're parents and it's not necessarily your child that's looking to explore, but maybe one of your children's friends, is that I've had parents who have helped me to do my hair, not necessarily to cut it, not necessarily to dye it, but to help me do different hairstyles. For example, one of my childhood best friends invited me to her prom. And this was not her mom being supportive necessarily, but because I completely messed up what I was doing with my hair. So then her mom ended up doing my hair for me. But it was a really nice experience. And that's something that wasn't permanent. It was one night, but I felt really loved by my friend's mom. And I think that you might have a chance to help young people express themselves in that temporary space, if their parents are not necessarily sure of it, or if it's something that they're just looking at, that you could be a supportive parent to one of your children's friends.
I love that. And Diego, would you build on that? What other things would you say to parents? Because I have had a lot of parents say to me, I want to support my kid, but if I let my kid do and fill in the blank, whatever it is, to their hair, they're going to get bullied. It's going to be worse for them. What do you say? And how do you communicate how important that step could be for that child?
I would first say neighborhood jackets, mini skirts, boots, many colors of lipstick, and dudes overalls without shirts. everybody does something in some part of themselves that stretches the line. And I would just say that, one of the things that parents want to do is, as we're having to fight in all these states with all these bad anti-trans bills, every parent and every relative, every grandparent is fighting for those kids to have their way in the world. If you believe that is true, and if you're in this fight, make it part of their agenda. Let their agenda be important too, not just your agenda for them of go to school and be able to work. Maybe their priority is, I want to just be me. You're only going to be a kid once. And honestly, when it's over until probably you're 50, although I never had enough hormones in my life to go through anything that resembled any of that stuff. I was sub hormones. So I never had those excitements of let's do something really dramatic. But remembering what it was like for parents to go on that first exciting date, or that wear that first perfect piece of clothing that you love that wasn't what your parents would have wanted. You turned out okay, and you've got these amazing children behind you who clearly parents and grandparents have given them enough courage and creativity, room to be creative, that they're going to contribute to this community and to the country and to the world. So how you support each decision is really important, because no one forgets. People remember that response, and you can't take it back. It's one of the things with PFLAG, we can help you learn to love your kids if you messed up in how you communicated that love the first time. But if it's something like hair, that really should be manageable for most parents.
And it's fascinating as we talk about this. It also makes me realize parents have a real opportunity here, because we do know that hair is gendered. McKenzie, the fact that you said boy haircuts and girl haircuts, and that there was that perception in your community where you grew up, there it is. It still exists. And every single time we create a space where a child or a young person can have the hair they want, even if that doesn't conform to what we traditionally thought, male haircuts and female haircuts, never having any conversation about anybody who's neither. Every time we can undo that this is one haircut for a particular gender, we are undoing those gender stereotypes that hurt us all. It's not just benefiting the child in front of you, but it's literally changing the perceptions that there are only some things that are accessible to one gender or the other. And as I said, that immediately excludes anyone who doesn't fit into either one of those buckets. I know that we have had more comments going on during today's conversation than I think I have ever seen before. And so I'm wondering if Jamie, if you want to pop in just for 1 second and talk about some of the stuff that you've been seeing, because I can't read it all while we're talking, and it's really good.
Yeah. I put in the chat for folks if they felt comfortable to share their personal hair stories, and we got lots and lots of comments. People making note of the fact that getting an undercut for the first time was like a queer coming of age moment for them. Somebody else mentioning that an undercut felt really freeing, and it was like a little bit of rebellion for them. Somebody has sort of said that hair was such a critical piece of their gender expression, that cutting their partner's hair is an expression of love. Lots and lots of people just sharing really important things about hair and how it is tied to our identity. Somebody who said, I think that my long hair is possibly part of the reason I get misgendered so often, but I'm holding on to it because it's a part of me. It's who I am. And I'm valid no matter how my hair looks. Somebody else shared that, they had cut their hair very short as a teenager and was misgendered, but it was a long time ago. And it was when we first really started seeing short hair on women for the first time in popular culture. Somebody else, a couple people really resonated with you, Jean Marie, as you were talking about your long hair as a rebellion. Somebody says, I like my curly hair and I want to grow it out, but sometimes it can bring back those parts of dysphoria. And somebody else who said, I got a super short lesbian cut once. It was a great haircut, but it was really upsetting and I like my lob. Everyone is really resonating with this one and had just so much to say.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. This was one of the most fun conversations I think we've ever had. We could probably go on for hours about our experiences and how it's changed things. So, there's one more. yeah, I felt like I cut off my identity. I mean, you just don't think about it until suddenly it's your experience. Thank you all so much, McKenzie and Diego. Thank you, thank you, thank you. This was exactly the conversation I thought we should have. And thank you for being part of it and bringing your perspectives. They're so fascinating and really give us all something to think about. So thank you both. And Jamie, thank you for managing the conversation.
Thank you.
Well, everybody, that is the end of another show. That 30 minutes goes by really fast. Next week, we will be back with something new for you. Probably not about hair, but until then, continue flipping your lovely hair or touching it as appropriate. And as we sign off every single week, we say the same thing. We remind you to run fast, laugh hard, and most of all, be kind. And please, if you have not done it yet, get vaccinated and be responsible. Please care for the people around you as well as yourself. We really want to see you sometime soon and give you those great big PFLAG hugs. And that's the only way we're getting there, people. So we will see you again next Thursday. Until then, take care of yourself. If you need support before then, make sure you reach out to us at pflag.org or pflag.org/find to find your local chapter. Take care of yourself, and we'll see you next week on Something to Talk About. Bye, everybody.